I took care of my boyfriend through his cancer. He left me for his nurse after remission. I still remember the way he texted me. Not called, not pulled me aside, just a text with 3 words. It's not good. At the time, I thought he meant the test results, the scans, the biopsies. I didn't realize it was a preview of the next 2 years of my life. I dropped everything: job, friends, what was left of my hobbies. I moved into his apartment because it was closer to the hospital. I said I'd only be there a few weeks. I stayed through the surgeries, the chemo, the nights of vomiting and moaning and silence. I shaved his head when the hair started falling out in patches. I wiped things no one wants to talk about. I held his hand through pain meds and mood swings and breakdowns that left me crying in the bathroom with the water running so he wouldn't hear me fall apart too. Doctors were nice, nurses even nicer. One in particular. Blonde, soft-spoken, too smiley. I thought she was just kind. He said she reminded him of his mom. I didn't like that comparison, but I let it go. Everything felt too fragile to challenge. I stopped sleeping properly, ate standing up, gained weight, then lost too much. I watched myself vanish in mirrors, then stopped checking altogether. My world became appointments, prescriptions, insurance calls, and pretending I wasn't terrified every time he coughed or groaned. People said I was strong, that I was doing God's work. I didn't feel strong. I felt trapped in a slow-moving disaster. But I stayed, because that's what love means, right? He never said thank you. Not once. I assumed he couldn't. Maybe it hurt too much to admit how dependent he'd become. Maybe saying thank you made him feel weak. I built excuses for him the same way I built my life around his treatment plan. Constantly, desperately, with no blueprint and no thanks. When remission came, it was like someone cracked a window in a smoke-filled room. I thought we'd breathe again. I thought we'd rebuild. Maybe even take a trip somewhere quiet. I had it all planned in my head. Sunsets, healing, something that looked like happiness. Instead, he started spending more time out. Just walking, he said. Needed air, needed space. I understood. I told him to take his time. He started dressing better. I assumed it was about feeling like himself again. He'd been wearing the same 3 hoodies for a year. I was happy to see him care again. But then he started guarding his phone, changed his passcode, laughed at texts he wouldn't show me. I didn't ask at first. I didn't want to be that person, the paranoid one, the clingy girlfriend who couldn't handle him recovering. One night, I made pasta, his favorite. He didn't come home. No warning, no message, just silence. He showed up the next morning with a coffee in his hand and didn't even pretend to apologize. Just said, I needed time to think. I asked, think about what? He shrugged, said, everything. I felt something crack in me. Not loudly, quietly. Like a hairline fracture you don't notice until the whole thing splits. He started mentioning her in passing. The nurse. Said she was funny. Said she got him. Said she understood what he'd been through. Like, I hadn't stood by his side every goddamn day while his body turned inside out. Like I hadn't cleaned up after every stage of his deterioration while she clocked out at 7 p.m. I kept telling myself it was in my head. That I was tired. That I needed to focus on us. On rebuilding. But he wasn't rebuilding. He was already gone. I just hadn't caught up to the fact yet. The final hit came 2 weeks after his last scan. I found a photo on his phone. Not even hidden. Just there in his camera roll. Him and her. Smiling. Her hand on his chest. The chest I used to bandage. The chest I lay on when I couldn't cry anymore. I didn't say anything. Not right away. I just handed him the phone. Watched his face. No panic. No shame. Just a soft shrug and... I didn't know how to tell you. That was it. Not an apology. Not regret. Just a flat confession like I was a stranger. Like I hadn't poured 2 years of my life into keeping him alive. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of him. I just walked into the bedroom, packed 2 bags, and left. He didn't follow me. He didn't stop me. And that hurt more than anything else. I'd been there when his body gave up, when he begged me not to let go, when he swore I was the only thing keeping him grounded. And now he just let me leave like I was some distant acquaintance he felt awkward around. I slept in my car that night, not because I had to, I could have called my sister, my friend, even my boss, but I didn't want to talk. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want someone telling me I was better off. I just wanted silence. I just wanted proof that I was still real, still separate from him, that I could still be alone without collapsing. I didn't cry until 3 days later. Not a dramatic breakdown, just a sudden, quiet leak while I was brushing my teeth at a motel. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized my face. Gaunt, pale, eyes that didn't look like mine. He got a second chance at life, and he used it to trade me in for a fresh start. I lost years, weight, and pieces of myself I still haven't found again. And the worst part? I still wonder if he's telling her the same things he used to tell me. That he's scared, that he needs her, that she's saving him. I used to believe that meant something. Now I know better. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. It didn't feel like mine. Most of my stuff was still in his place, but I didn't want any of it. I let the toothbrush go. The blankets I'd bought for his hospital nights, the clothes I used to sleep in next to him while machines beeped in the dark. Let them rot in his drawer next to whatever fantasy he was building with her. I checked into a small Airbnb. Just one room, no kitchen. I ate cereal with bottled water and left the TV on so it wouldn't feel like silence. Every hour felt like a punch to the stomach. Not because I missed him. I did, but not in the way people think. I missed the version of me that believed he loved me. I missed the girl who thought she was part of his survival story. Turns out I was just a placeholder until he could breathe on his own again. He texted me a week after I left. I'm sorry. I didn't plan it like this. I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Deleted it. Not because I didn't want to answer, but because if I started talking, I wouldn't stop, and I knew he wouldn't care enough to read any of it. I told no one. Not at first. Not my sister. Not my friends. I was too embarrassed. How do you explain that you stuck around when he was bald, vomiting, and begging for death, but now that he's jogging and flirting and glowing again, he's with someone else? You can't. You just shut up and sit with the ugly truth. I scrolled through his social media. He hadn't posted in months during treatment, but suddenly he was back. Coffee shop photos, a hike, a selfie at the beach, and yeah, she was in them. Not labeled, not tagged, but in the background, close enough. I didn't like the person I became in those days. Bitter, obsessive, tracking their movements like I could somehow make it make sense. I needed to know if he'd lied, if it started while I was still cooking his meals and washing his sheets and checking his medication alarms. The answer was yes. I found her account. She'd kept it public. Dumb move. Or maybe she didn't think I'd be watching. Either way, the proof was there. A photo of 2 smoothies posted 4 weeks before I left. Guess who brought me these after a long shift? With a winky face, his apartment counter in the background, his dog, his handwriting on a sticky note. 4 weeks while I was still paying his electric bill and chasing down prescription refills. While I was still telling people, he's trying. It's just hard. He wasn't trying. He was moving on. I could have messaged her, could have sent screenshots, could have blown it all up. But for what? So she'd feel guilty? So he'd call me dramatic? So I'd be another ex-girlfriend ranting in the DMs? Number, I didn't want to be remembered like that. If they were going to build their fresh little fantasy, I wanted them to do it without me haunting the background. Let them believe I vanished. Let them try to piece it together when the guilt catches up. If it ever does. I finally told my sister. Not because I wanted comfort. I just needed someone to say it out loud to. She offered to help me move out of the Airbnb and into her guest room. I said no. I needed to stay in the in-between a little longer. I needed to sit with the mess before I let anyone sweep it up. I started therapy. Online. Cheap sessions with someone who looked too young to understand what heartbreak over a cancer survivor even meant. She asked questions like, "What part of you is grieving most?" I almost laughed. What part of me isn't? He'd become this symbol, this project I poured everything into. I didn't just nurse him back. I gave him the best pieces of me. Patience I didn't know I had. Loyalty I didn't know could stretch that far. And the second he stood back up, he walked into someone else's arms. He didn't break up with me. He didn't cry or say he was torn. He just let it happen. Let me do the heavy lifting, and when the house was built, handed the keys to someone else. I got my name taken off his lease. I canceled the leftover subscriptions still tied to my card, took my name off the hospital contact forms, blocked his number. It didn't make me feel better. It just made things quieter. The therapist asked if I wanted closure. I told her there was no such thing. Closure implies it was mutual, that something ended cleanly. This didn't end. It shifted while I wasn't looking, and by the time I noticed, I was already out of the picture. People started asking why I looked different. "You've lost weight," they'd say. Or, "You seem quieter these days." I just nodded. What was I supposed to say? That I'd spent 2 years building a future around someone who treated me like a temporary caretaker? One night, I ran into someone we used to hang out with. She asked how he was doing. I lied, said I hadn't seen him in a while. She said, "He looks great now. Must be nice to finally have your lives back." I just smiled, didn't correct her, didn't say I was the one who lost everything, didn't mention that my life didn't come back. It got erased. I stopped checking their pages. Not out of strength, out of exhaustion. I just couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep punishing myself by looking at a man who got better and decided I didn't fit in his recovery. I thought about confronting him, saying everything, unloading the rage. But then what? He'd nod, say sorry again, shrug, and move on. And I'd still be the one screaming into the void while he curled up next to her at night. I wanted something else now. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just distance. Real, cold, unbreakable distance. I never said goodbye. Not to him. Not to the version of myself I left behind in that apartment. Not even to the routines I used to live by. Med schedules, specialist calls, meal prep in plastic containers. One day I just stopped, and the silence swallowed the rest. The world didn't pause. That was the worst part. No one pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you just lost something big." People still went to work, still posted gym selfies, still laughed at their phones in cafes. I stood in line at the grocery store one day and realized no one had a clue I was grieving someone still alive. I tried dating. That was a joke. I went on one dinner with a guy who kept talking about CrossFit and asked why I looked tired. I didn't explain that I used to measure time in morphine doses and vomiting fits. Just smiled, paid for my half, and left before dessert. I wasn't ready. Not even close. My body was different. My face, my voice. I didn't even trust my own opinions anymore. I'd spent too long filtering myself through what he needed, what wouldn't upset him, what would make things easier. I didn't know how to just exist for myself. People told me to heal, to move on, to take the lessons with me. But there's no neat takeaway here. No wisdom I picked up while scrubbing blood off bathroom tiles or dragging myself through another night of fake optimism. I didn't come out of this stronger. I came out hollow, cautious, smarter maybe, colder definitely. I got a new apartment, smaller, farther from the hospital. It's quiet, clean. Everything inside it belongs to me and only me. No reminders, no shared toothbrushes, no smell of antiseptic, no bag packed for emergencies. I got a part-time job doing freelance editing, something flexible, something that didn't involve people asking how I'm really doing. I don't want to explain. I don't owe anyone that anymore. He messaged me again, a few months after I left. This time it was longer, said he hoped I was okay, said he missed me sometimes, and wanted me to know he still cared, that he appreciated everything I did. Past tense. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. That would mean I cared enough to cut him off. Instead, I just let it sit. Like a voicemail from a number you've memorized but never call back. He made his choice. He lives with it. I live with mine. I heard from a mutual friend that he and the nurse broke up. I didn't ask why, didn't even pretend to care. Maybe she got tired of playing the dream girl role once the drama wore off. Maybe he realized she wasn't going to save him either. Or maybe he just needed another clean slate like he always did. Whatever it was, I didn't flinch when I heard it. Just nodded, said, "Okay," and moved on. There was nothing to gain from hearing he was single again. That door wasn't cracked open. It was gone, burned to ash. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and forget where I am. I reach over to the other side of the bed and feel the cold. It used to sting. Now it just reminds me I'm finally alone. Not abandoned, not left out. Just alone. By choice. There's no final scene here. No triumphant montage. I don't throw his stuff off a balcony. I don't glow up and find a perfect man who treats me like gold. I don't even feel particularly proud of how I handled things. But I am still here. Still brushing my teeth. Still showing up. Still figuring out how to want things for myself again. Some days, I wonder if he thinks of me. If he ever feels guilty. But then I stop. Because it doesn't matter. His thoughts don't buy back what I gave. They don't repair the hours I lost sitting by a hospital bed while he texted someone else. They don't fix the way I disappeared so he could reappear as someone shinier. He got better. That's the truth. And I disappeared. But now I'm here again. Not healed, not whole, but here. And for now, that's enough.